we're going to talk about how to build your first affordable housing development today. You've done a lot for, how old are you now? Like, I remember listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, and it was like 1,400 units by 29 or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, I'm 34 now.
It's crazy. You might be the youngest light tech developer in the entire country. So congrats to you on that. So
No, there's a couple young ones, but yeah, it's been fun. I was lucky and fortunate and blessed that I figured out what I wanted to do when I was like 19 years old. Like it was still my freshman year of college. I learned about affordable housing. I think most people kind of just stumble into affordable, and I did too. But I think I was just lucky that when I stumbled into it, I was really young, so I could start right away in
yeah.
affordable.
And let's talk about that, because I think I get asked a lot by college guys or whoever, like, how do you break into real estate? How did that work? And I feel like your story is a good example of adding value and getting your, like, squeezing your foot in the door. So how did you get started in that?
Yeah. I was going pre med, realized that was not for me at all. And I was
Same with
looking
me.
for, yeah, yeah, I'm sure we're a big boat of people, but figured out I loved economics. So I switched majors to that. But then at the same time, I was like, what can I do with an economics major? Like, what can I actually do in the world? And at the same time, there's a student housing development. And I was like, all right, that's cool. How can I do something like that? I want to build something. I want to like change the face of our neighborhood for the long term. And so I just figured out a way to, it was kind of happenstance. It was like I talked to a mentor of mine. I was like, man, I'd love to do something like that. And he's like, oh, I know the owner. But it wasn't just that connection. He helped connect me to the developer, but the developer's like, all right, you got to like, prove your worth. And so we ended up getting a bunch of people out to his groundbreaking, but it still wasn't like he was like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire you. It's like I had to call him for weeks and weeks and weeks, and finally got a job. And I was basically a leasing assistant, leasing apartments. And we leased 355 beds, I think it was, in like 5 months. And I would just loved every second of it. I was like, this is fun. But I
And
knew I
that
was
was
like,
the student housing, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to see it go up, and it was just such an awesome experience. Um, but I also realized I was like, I don't want to be in management. It was a great experience, but I was like, I want to do what he's doing. I want to put the deal together. I want to figure out the vision, and I want to see it to reality. And at the same time, I volunteered for a nonprofit called Family Scholar House. They do amazing work, and they provide affordable housing for single parents going back to get their college degree, and provide a community around that, and childcare and services, and really helping people get higher paying jobs so they can ultimately make their way out of affordable housing. And I volunteered there, and I met some of the kids, and I got to hang out with them and just hear their story, and I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay, I want to develop and I want to help people, and that's affordable housing. And it just snowballed from there. And I was fortunate. We started a modular affordable development company in college. And then that segued into getting a job with one of the top 10 affordable developers in the country. And really cut my teeth there, learned there for 6 years. They had me working all throughout the Southeast, from Kentucky to Texas to Florida, and found my sweet spot in Tennessee and Louisiana, and did over 1,300 units with them. But eventually realized I was like, I want to realize this with my own vision, my own passion, and our own way of doing affordable housing. And that includes, resident services and sustainability and placemaking and mixed use and mix of incomes. And that's what kind of precipitated or created Holiday Ventures almost 6 years ago now. And it's been a whirlwind ever since. We've had a lot of success, very fortunate that we've found a niche of really serving communities, and serving them impactfully through our developments. And cities have resonated with that, communities have resonated with that, our investors have resonated with that, our partners have. And so, we're very lucky that we get to do what we love every day, and there seems to be a place for that in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a place in the market for it. I feel like every day I read headlines about inaffordability of housing, and uh, you're you're making some changes. So let's teach the audience about how to do their first project. Me and the audience, I guess. So you have a YouTube series. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but basically building your first affordable multifamily development. So I watched that, and so we're gonna have lots of questions on that.
I love it.
So you leave your job. You did you have a deal lined up when you first left, or were you just like, I'm done and I'm going to figure this out somehow?
So I had done some with my girlfriend at the time, now wife. We had bought a couple houses and turned them into Airbnbs. So we had about 5 short-term rentals that were generating some income. It was really just like enough to live off of.
Yeah,
So that was our kind of steady income that we had, but that was it. And
yeah,
I bought with a partner a 10 unit. That was the first deal. That was like right as I was leaving. We had bought that one, and that helped to a degree. But first I think it was like 8 or 10 months we were rehabbing those units, so there was no cash flow.
yeah.
Um,
Negative cash flow.
but we immediately, like as soon as we started the company, I think we got one piece of land under contract, which crazy enough, that is the one deal that is still has not closed. Um, so that didn't really get us anywhere.
Yeah,
And then we had a lead for a deal that really came into our laps as soon as we started the company, and that was actually one of the first developments we closed. But it took us uh, 2 years, a little over 2 years from that point to close our first major tax credit development.
yeah. And so when you are going out, and did you pick a market, or did you just kind of see whatever came towards you?
Yeah, we were living in Nashville at the time, and I had been working pretty much for about 6 years, like my whole career at that other company. I was working in Nashville. We had just recently moved there, so I was only living there for about a year, but I'd had experience in that market for about 6 years. Knew all the players, had a lot of trust built up from my track record doing other developments, and so really just, I mean, we're in Nashville. Nashville is like one of the fastest growing cities in the country. And I knew that there was and I saw it firsthand, like there's such a humongous affordable housing need there. I was like, we need to just start here and start in our backyard. Um, and so that's what we did. And there was just immediate need for what we were doing. Just not enough affordable housing being built in the Nashville metro for what they actually need. And so it was, very much met with open arms what we were doing.
Yeah. And how are you building the team? Were you kind of piggybacking off your previous career and working with similar GCs and property managers and architects and engineers, or how did you source those relationships?
Yeah, good question. It was kind of depending on the relationship. Uh, I would go different ways. So, I worked with the same architects, the same engineers, because I'd already done 1,300 units with them, and I knew them and I trusted them. And debt and equity partners. There were a couple that we kept. It's a lot of the same relationships. Um, but actually, the first deal we did, Shelby House, we worked with a brand new partner that I'd never worked with before. Somebody that I had talked with at my former employer, but never actually got a deal done. But the first deal we did was Shelby House was a very, very out of the box, very creative, very complicated deal. And because of that, a lot of groups were like, hey, this is your first deal on your own. This is really complicated. I think we got like 23 no's from different debt and equity groups. There was one group that gave us an LOI. That was PNC Bank. And they ended up doing the deal, and it's been a home run ever since. But my equity partner at PNC was like, most people when they do their own thing, they pick like a single or a double type deal to start with, and you just kind of went for a grand slam on the first deal.
What
But we
made
got
you
it
want to
done.
go for the Grand Slam versus going the other way? Was it something about the partnership? Was it something about the site, or what made you go that way?
Yeah, it really, I mean, it's not like we planned to do that. It was more just the way the deal structure came about, that it ultimately, that's what it became. And a little more context for everybody. The The deal was with a nonprofit, a substance abuse recovery center that had been operating from that location. I mean, we're talking about like 2 blocks away from the Titan Stadium, less than a mile walk to the heart of downtown Nashville. You have views of the entire skyline, like just primo location that frankly we would not have been able to afford. But this nonprofit had assembled this land over decades and had been operating their services there. But basically, they for many years had been at a capacity, max capacity. They're helping about 900 people a year go through their recovery program. They're one of the best in the state, one of the best in the country at what they do, but they had to constantly turn people away. But their site wasn't really dense. They had a couple buildings, but they were all like one-story buildings, and they were also becoming obsolete. They were buildings, 40, 50, 60 years old that were falling in disrepair. And they're like, we're turning people away. We have old buildings. We need to do something to kind of transform our nonprofit to the next level of service and impact. And so it just really came down to multiple conversations we had with another developer who was our partner on the transaction, Evergreen Real Estate, and then the board of the nonprofit. They said, hey, we have a vision for the future of our campus. They said they've been, they got calls all the time from high-end luxury developers who was like, hey, we just want to buy the parcel. We'll pay you top dollar, but you guys have to move. And they're like, no, we can't move. All of our clients are like within walking distance of this location. They're typically, people coming out of homelessness or, living under the bridge. And it's like a block away from where the bridge is. So they're like, we can't leave. But they wanted to figure out a way to leverage the value of their land, expand their services, but also they didn't want to take on any debt. They hadn't had any debt for the last 30 or 40 years. And so they didn't want to start now. And so we had to come up with a creative solution to say, how can we build them a new building? How can we expand their services? How can we do it without disrupting their current services on site and do affordable housing and also do it in a way in which there's a symbiotic relationship between the recovery services and the affordable housing next door, and do it in a way that pencils, right? And so we got to work. We were playing. It was like playing Tetris on the site. It's a whole city block, but trying to fit on so many different uses. And we really also we tried to over deliver for the nonprofit partner. Samaritan Recovery Community is the name of the group. And we tried to say, hey, how do we double their services? Let's try to double their services. So they were at 52 beds previously. We ended up being able to provide them 132 beds. So we actually more than doubled their capacity. And their square footage went from, I think it was about 30,000 square feet. They're now at just over 70,000 square feet in their new building.
And so how did you structure that? Because if you said they didn't want to take debt, kind of need debt to build stuff for the most part, unless you're building with cash. So how did you approach that partnership and that structure?
Yeah. So we were able to leverage in total, and this is why it is the grand slam deal as the partner prescribed it. It was a total of 16 different funding sources or funding tools that it took to make that happen. So we leveraged every single grant we could find, state, local, metro, even federal grants. We figured out a way to get every single one we could get our hands on, and we won them through RFPs and different processes. And that's ultimately how it was able to happen. They contributed the land, so that helped. But then on top of that, we were able to leverage and utilize a lot of different funding tools that helped pay for their building and the affordable housing. And also, we still had debt on the entire thing, but we didn't include their building in the lien. So it was only the lien on the multifamily building.
And was that a 4% project?
That's right. Yeah, it was 4% LIHTC with bonds. It was 195 affordable units. It was a parking garage and a 70,000 square foot nonprofit building.
Okay. And looking at your website, it looks like you do more garden style than like a wrap or a podium projects. What made that one different for you on that one?
Yeah. And I will say we actually do more 4-story elevator served. We don't do a lot of garage wrap, but
Yep.
we probably do more 4-story elevator served than we do actual garden style. But to answer that question, it was difficult, but leveraging those 16 different funding sources, the value of the land was what enabled us to do that. And then we also, to finish the total development, so they were on a piece of the land to operate their current existing services. That's where once they moved into their new building, which was this past March, about a year ago, they we were able to break ground. We broke ground in October of this last year on phase two, which was in their former building footprint. And that's another 289 units of affordable housing. So
Cool.
between the two, I think it was like 470, 78 or 74. Yeah,
Okay.
474
Yeah.
total units created over the whole city block.
And did you have any issues with? I've never really seen LIHTC projects have any commercial space, just from my limited experience. Was that any issue for you?
Um, I mean, it was it made the whole process a little bit more difficult, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But we have since every development we've done with Holiday Ventures has included some form of commercial or retail space, whether that's nonprofit space, community space, or actually fully dedicated, commercial retail that we're leasing out to third party groups. Um, so it's been a learning curve for us, but I think it just ultimately makes for a better development. And we did in phase two, we're including about 4,500 square feet of commercial space on the first floor that we'll lease to the nonprofit partner for $1 a year. So that'll be an additional space that they can grow into. And the goal is it'll be, they're still deciding it'll be delivered in 2 years from now, but they're trying to decide what can they do that would be forward facing, kind of like a job training center for their graduates and a way for them to get their brand and their name out there to the community.
Okay. I want to talk about the LIHTC process because I've tried to learn a lot about LIHTC and it's
Yeah,
hard to find any good information.
there is. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It's pretty hard to find.
yeah, and if I do, it's like a white paper of like 200 pages, and I don't have the attention span to do it. So when you're looking at sites in Nashville, Southeast, what is kind of your buy box on that? Are you exclusively in like qualified census tracts or anything like that? Or how does that look for you?
Yeah, good question. So a couple of our criteria, we're looking for 150 to 300 unit sites, ideally 3 to 4 story buildings, um, ideally on major corridors or up and coming redeveloping corridors. We're looking in both QCTs and DDAs, so qualified census tracts and difficult development areas that are HUD designated areas that change on an annual basis and where they encourage us to look and develop affordable housing by giving us a 30% boost in credits. But I mean, I've done deals previously in non QCT DDA areas, but with today's interest rates, with today's costs, with today's building and land costs, the deals just don't work without being in those census tracts because you need every tax credit you can get on the deal to fund it. And outside of that, it's looking at ultimately, I mean, every deal is different. We preferably look for zoned land, but that's harder and harder to come by. That actually fits our price point. We're typically in the ballpark of like 10 to 20K a door on land. The more work we have to put into entitling it, the less we'll pay. Um, but we will go through rezonings as well. And if we can assemble land, that's always great too. There's value to be added there. And also, if we can do a master plan development, we're about to close on phase one of our, I guess Shelby House would have been a master plan development, but on a city block, we're doing another one that's a little bit more suburban. That'll be 4 phases of both multifamily, retail, town center, um, and a daycare and first time homebuyer townhomes, and then also a single family community in the back. So we like doing that a lot. So if we have opportunities like that, but we look opportunistically for places that we believe will be high economic opportunity areas or up and coming economic opportunity areas for our residents, that also align with all the other boxes I just mentioned.
And on that master plan community side, I'm assuming you guys are just like papering the single family homes and selling them. Same with the townhomes, or are you building those as well?
The townhomes we are building, we got a grant for 20 first time homebuyer townhomes. So we're partnering with a nonprofit. Those will be at 80% AMI. So the nonprofit will help with down payment assistance and getting lower rates for the first time homebuyers, and also first time homebuyer education. Um, but we still haven't closed on that yet. We're still working on it, but that will likely be later this year. And then the single family in the back, we have to get the road and infrastructure that is included in the multifamily done first, which will close on the multifamily in about 6 months. So there's it's a ways out, is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. So we're looking at all options. It could be we'll likely find either somebody to partner with and they develop it, or we just you know put in the infrastructure and then sell the lots.
How do those conversations go with the nonprofits and getting the grants? Because you are a for profit developer, you do make developer fees. And some people might say those fees are huge. Other people would say they're not big enough for the amount of brain damage it takes. How do those conversations usually go?
Yeah, the best compliment I think we ever got was uh, that we even though we are a for-profit developer, we act like we are a nonprofit. And what they meant by that was we put our residents first, we put our developments first, we put our communities first. And I think that speaks to our mission and our ethos at Holiday Ventures. Like we are for profit. We're also trying to make a living. But I think that if you do things right, then there's a way to do well and do good at the same time. And our nonprofit partners completely resonate with our mission and our impact. Um, and they've even said it. At times it's refreshing because maybe some groups they've worked with in the past aren't that way. And
Yeah.
so I think that's ultimately, like, we have a nonprofit mindset, but we also want to make a living too at the same time.
Yep. And so as you find a site and you get it under contract, I'm assuming you aren't taking entitlement risk. So you need to rezone it. You need to design the site before you close on it. How are you funding those pre-development deals? Because it's $1, 2, $3 million of
Yeah.
architecture, architecture, engineering, studies, all of that
Yeah.
stuff. How do you structure that? Is that just all on an Amex credit card, or how are you doing it?
Yeah. We have the no limit credit card.
Yeah,
No, that'd be nice, but no, it's different avenues for different deals. But we Holiday Ventures has our own pre-development capital that we spend on deals, and then from time to time we will bring in individuals that want to invest alongside us. We typically don't do that unless we've already added some significant value to the deal. So we've gotten a grant award, we've rezoned the land, we've entitled it for more units, or something that's taken a gigantic leap forward for the deal and de-risked the deal for our investors. But those investors will invest anywhere from 50,000 to $1 million per individual or per family, or per investment group, and we'll raise anywhere from 2 to 4 million per deal if we do that. We don't do that for every deal, but when we do, it helps us get from the point of when we've de-risked it to closing, which could be a year to 2 years.
yeah. And do you feel like you have that pretty locked in by the time you're raising money, or is there some sort of risk that they're taking with that? Like, could it get shut down at some point, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every real estate transaction has risk associated with it, but I like to think that when we get our investors involved, we're not taking that decision lightly. Every investor, their first priority is protection of capital. Their second priority is making capital, and so we take that responsibility really, really seriously. And so we don't ever like, there was one deal that we were like, hey, there's a lot of risk associated with this deal. We're going to keep doing it, but we did not use any investor capital because I was just like, I didn't want to put my name on something, and I didn't want to put our brand on something that could potentially have risk for our investors. Um, so yeah, every time we get them involved, we feel pretty confident in our ability to close.
Yeah. And then how does that work on the pre-development costs? Are you guys getting a land bump at the end and that's when the investors get paid off? Are they staying through the project, or how does that equity investment work?
Yeah, so it's a short-term investment for them. It's 1 to 2 years, and we give them a preferred return that we pay out at financial closing. So when we close on our tax credit equity, when we close on our construction loan, we'll use part of those proceeds to pay back the pre-development expenses and any interest or preferred returns that are associated with that.
Okay. Um, and then, so you're doing all that pre-development stuff. And when do you start the actual LIHTC application process? And then also, after you get awarded those credits, how does it actually work with selling those credits to investors? Do you just sell them to the bank that's doing the debt for you, or how does that work?
Yeah, good question. So LIHTC application process, it varies widely by state. Every state does timing differently. Every state, has prerequisites and, minimum application standards. So I can generally tell you, like for Tennessee, for example, we typically will applying for credits is actually one of the last things we will do because of their requirements. They basically say as soon as you get an award, you have to close within 90 to 120 days. So we have
That's
to be
terrifying.
pretty, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot riding on it because you have to do a lot to get it to that point. I mean, you have to really spend significant capital, a lot of time developing plans, getting debt and equity partners involved, getting the entitlements, um, you know, running down any potential red flags or issues with the site. You have to do all that before you can even consider applying for THGA. And then they have, market study and appraisal and all these third party reports you have to get. Um, but and I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing, really, for anybody that's new getting into this, because that's a lot of risk up front. And I think too, knowing that you have to be really certain about the deal before you, like 2 years before you submit an application. It usually takes about 2 years. So how are you certain if you've never done that before? So I will say I've always been of the mind that, and this is anybody that asks me, this is the advice I give them is if you're trying to do your first LIHTC deal, or you're trying to do your first deal on your own, um, don't take the hard road and try to do it by yourself. You can, and if you want to do that, that's fine. But my first deal, I partnered with a group who had a great balance sheet, who had 6,000 units of experience. They didn't have LIHTC experience, but they had market rate experience. But I already had LIHTC experience from my former employer. So combining my experience plus their balance sheet and their market experience, our debt and equity groups got comfortable. THGA, this agency got comfortable. But just thinking about, like, especially for your first couple of deals, how can you partner with somebody who's already done it so you're not reinventing the wheel, and you can learn a whole lot more quickly, or do what I did when I started my career and go work for somebody who's done it, and you can learn exponentially faster. I mean, I was very fortunate. I was 25 years old when I did my first LIHTC deal that I sourced from start to finish, and it was a 192 unit deal in Baton Rouge. It was like a $30 million transaction at the time, and that was my first deal. So getting that exposure, but it was because I had mentors at the company who collectively had like 100 years experience that I could learn from there. They always said, they're like, hey, we've made tens of millions of dollars worth of mistakes, so we want you to make $1 million or less of mistakes. But that was an awesome experience because I could walk down the hall and really kind of pick their brain on any subject or topic or angle. And that's really, I think, what helped me learn so quickly at the beginning, was just learning from somebody who'd done it before.
Okay. So you win this tax credit application, and then you need to start. I think you said you need to start in like 90 to 120 days. So are
Yeah,
you
that's
just
right.
hammering the phone, seeing who wants to buy these tax credits, or how does that work?
We typically start shopping them if we know we have a good deal, and keep in mind too, like before we get to THDA or the tax credit application process, you have to have some kind of gap filler. And so our capital stack is typically 40% tax credit equity, 50% loan, like your standard commercial loan, and then 10% is our gap filler. And that's those are, it could be Amazon's housing equity fund dollars, it could be home funds. It could be CDBG funds. It could be local grant dollars from the city or the metro. But it's something that fills the gap, because the 40 and the 50% pieces, you can get that from THDA, or you get a financing tool that then you can take to the private market and get private capital dollars to backstop those two. But the 10% is the hard part to get. But we have to go out and get that 10%. We have to go out and apply and win the grants before we get to THDA. But at that point, we know we have grants in hand, and we have the confidence that, hey, we got a good deal. As long as we get credits and bonds awarded, we're going to get this thing closed. So we're going to start shopping debt and equity partners. We're going to figure out who's the right fit for the deal, who needs credits in Nashville or Huntsville or Atlanta, and who can lend on the deal, give the best deal on the construction loan and the permanent loan. So we have to line up all that financing. We typically have partners at least picked out, like they don't have to be like fully signed up, but we at least have a good idea of who, if we get awarded, who we will immediately pull the trigger with and move forward. But typically debt and equity groups, they can close within 90 days. Some can do it a little quicker, but usually you want 90 to 120 days of their time to get through their due diligence process and their internal approval process for their funding. So it's inevitable you have to get them before you actually get an award.
Yep. And how are you getting in touch with these grants? Like, where do you even get started? Are you talking to the housing authority, or you just know people from doing it for so long, or how's that part work?
Yeah. So there's usually about two or three places you can get grants from. It's either the housing authority, the Office of Housing, or the Office of Economic Development. It's usually one of those three places. There are some states, like state agencies, who give out tax credits and bonds, who also have funding. So that's maybe a fourth place I would look. And then maybe the fifth place would be, it's more sporadic, but some cities have private capital dollars, like Amazon's fund, that is private capital, but is going toward almost like a grant or a low interest loan to help finance the affordable housing. That is much less common, but some cities do have that also.
Okay. So you get these tax credits sold, and then you start construction. And then, and from my limited understanding about LIHTC deals, it sounds like it's mostly the development fee thing. And then how does cash flow look like on the backside? Is it really existent, or is it there?
There is cash flow if you underwrite your deals right, but it's significantly less than what a market rate deal would be. You're you're
Okay.
you're making the majority of your income from the deal from the developer fee. So
Yeah.
it's kind of opposite of a market rate deal in that way, where the market rate developers typically make the majority of their income on the back end when they sell it or refinance it, whereas we don't have that big capital event. We're holding on to these for 15 plus years, so it's more fee and smaller cash flow basis.
And after that, I'm assuming you're doing like a 15-year at 60, 70% AMI or something like that. What happens at the end of that 15 years?
Yes. So our each of our LIHTC funded deals come with a federal affordability restriction for 15 years, but each state adds on their own affordability restriction on top of that. Every state varies. I think California is up to 50 or 55 years. Tennessee does 30 years total. So they add on another 15 years. So we have to keep it affordable for 30 years. But really, our mission and our goal with Holiday Ventures is long-term affordability. So really our plan is once it hits the 15-year, like the 15 to 20-year mark, we can take it back into the tax credit program again and use tax credits to finance basically a rehabilitation or, bringing up to current market standards and fixing up the units. And you just extend the affordability for another 30 years from that point.
And do you guys do, sorry, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, but do you
You're
guys
good.
do
You're
third
good.
party management or do you have that in house?
Yeah, we do third party right now. I think at some point um, we'll get to the point where we need to create our own. Um, I think we've been really focused on what we're best at, which is putting the deal together and developing it and making sure ultimately that resident services are um, implemented at our properties. But we work hand in hand with our third party property managers to implement that.
Okay. And what does the future look like for you as far as what Holiday Ventures looks like? Is it just continue to develop affordable housing in Nashville, or are you going to other markets or going bigger? How does that look?
Yeah. So we've been actively expanding our team, not only for our current pipeline here in Nashville, but also looking at other major metros who have the same issues that Nashville does, and have a need for the same type of deals we're doing here that are unique, placemaking, sustainability, resident services. And so we are looking in the Carolinas and Georgia right now, and we'll likely start looking in other markets here soon as well.
Okay. And you're doing a cool deal with Amazon, and not sure how much we can talk about, but I'd like to hear how that came to be. Like how you met
Yeah.
Amazon to do this project, what their goals are, and how that all works.
Yeah, definitely. So Amazon, I think it was like February of 2021. Amazon made this. It was a surprise to me. I think it was a surprise to a lot of people. They made a big announcement that they were going to put $2 billion of their money into a fund that was a housing equity fund that they would then dedicate to affordable housing. They would invest it into affordable housing in Seattle, Nashville, and Arlington, Virginia. Basically, their three biggest office, concentration of jobs in offices. And I think for them, it was an opportunity to, they're always seen as, they bring in high paying tech jobs and they have a negative inverse effect on, affordability levels in whatever cities they're in. And so they wanted a way to be more proactive about that and be seen as more of a community partner. And so as soon as literally like the next day, as soon as that announcement came out, I was like, all right, there's sometimes like you get like a sign, you're like, all right, that is something I need to hone in on. Like they picked Nashville and I'm working in Nashville. I just, I'm I think I was a year and a half into my company at the time, still really early days. I think we had one or two employees at that point. We still hadn't closed Shelby House. And I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to build a strong relationship with Nashville and try to be their go-to partner in Nashville. And so I figured out who was the local contact at Amazon. They'd hired a bunch of people from Nashville Chamber of Commerce, and friend of a friend. I was like, "Hey, can you introduce me to this lady?" And got a warm introduction. Grabbed coffee with their local connection, and really just built a relationship with her. Started off with her, and just continued to add value any way I could of like helping educate her, because a lot of the people, like, she is more of a public facing, community engagement person. She didn't know much about affordable housing at the time. And so I was just trying to do anything I could to like help educate her so she could learn more about this industry that they're now funding $2 billion with, and just tried to add value to her. And ultimately just kept in constant contact with her. And then as soon as they opened up the window, we ended up applying for like, I think 3 different deals. And one of them was Stonebridge Lofts, which was a 311 unit community in a suburb of Nashville called Goodlettsville. And we had 11,500 square feet of commercial. It was on a major corridor. And we had our clubhouse is 100% solar powered. It has Tesla batteries in it. So we basically overpower the batteries during the day, and then at night it runs off the batteries. And really the combination of all that plus our resident services, Amazon was like, this is interesting. We like all the different things you have going on here. It's not just affordable housing. And that's when I knew, I was like, all right, if they like this one, like every single project that we do is like this. Like we have many layers of unique factor to what we do because we believe that that creates better outcomes. And Amazon really resonated with that. And so we from that deal, we helped. It was kind of funny. They're like, what interest rate do you want and what terms do you want? I was like, I don't know, 100% forgivable and 0% rate. And it's like, you got to ask. And they're like, we're not going to do that. But it was like, I was in a way we got to kind of help them, give them feedback on the program. They were already working on deals in Seattle and Arlington, but they hadn't done anything in Nashville yet. So we were kind of helping them build the Nashville program. And it was a lot of work. It was a lot of calls. But I think helping educate them and share everything we knew and being very transparent about everything we knew about Nashville and Tennessee and affordable housing here, that I think helped build a lot of trust. And so we were the first private developer to partner with Amazon here in Nashville, and they invested $32 million into Stonebridge in a second position loan and really helped make that deal financially feasible. And so we're now working on our third transaction with Amazon and are looking at another one as well in their round two that they announced last summer. It's been a very fruitful relationship, to say the least. It's been a great partnership.
Yeah. And so they're not doing like the gap finding or the gap funding of like that last 10%. This is just bank debt and second position loan.
I would consider it a different form of gap filler. We still have to pay it back whenever we refinance, but it's almost like considered like part of it's soft debt, like part of it's payable out of cash flow, and that's what helps the deal pencil. And they're giving below market interest rates, which also helps the deal pencil. So they're giving terms that are well below market. It comes at a price. They want to see long-term affordability, longer than we would normally. So like I mentioned earlier, like Tennessee, you're only required to do 30 years. They wanted to see 99 years, which was at the time was unprecedented in Nashville. And we figured out a way to deliver on 99 years that, again, lines up well with our mission because we believe in long-term affordability. And we did like a stair step all the way to 99 years.
That's awesome. So last question for you. I've done some industrial developments, retail, some apartments. One of my serial investors reached out about doing something in affordable housing. How would you do a small infill multifamily deal? Maybe it's similar to the Amazon structure of, let's say, like $1 million of low interest mezzanine position or second position loan. Is that even the right way to do it? Or how would you recommend doing something like that on a smaller scale?
Yeah. I mean, I think the Amazon model has been a really great model. I think because they've wanted really long affordability periods, they've been willing to put in more money. But I think you could put in less money if you do lower interest rates and you do either a combination of, some of it's forgivable or it's payable out of cash flow only. It's like a soft loan. And that way it doesn't count against your DSCR calculations. So you can borrow more permanent debt and it not be affected by the other loan. But that's similar to like we'll get home or CDBG dollars, which are federal funds, and they come through a local housing authority or office of housing, and they are typically at like a low interest, like AFR interest rate, and we pay out of cash flow over a certain period of time. It could be 15 or 20 years, or sometimes 30 years. But that is a way in which, and you can create affordability at maybe a lower dollar per unit level. And also in the long term, if you're taking a long-term horizon look, you can actually recycle that money and be able to reuse it over and over again. That happened to us quite a bit in Louisiana. They, of course, unfortunately get hit with quite a few hurricanes, and they get a lot of FEMA dollars that come in post hurricanes. And then once basically that money can go towards affordable housing, but there's a payback period over 20 years. But, you look at, there's a lot of Katrina dollars that went out in 2008, 2009, 2010 that are now coming back around to the state that they can now reinvest into more
Oh, cool.
affordable housing. So it's kind of like it's circle of life for the capital that can continue long-term affordability with more units.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll link that your YouTube channel, and
Yeah.
you used to have a podcast, so I'll link that as well. Um, and appreciate the time. We desperately need more affordable housing, so hopefully this podcast inspires someone else to go do it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And if anybody has any other questions, happy to reach out over email, or I'm on Instagram or LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Evan.
Yeah. Thank you, Tanner.